Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk, coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes app. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl. Yes, you're right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you are listening and watching us. So, hello on the radio, hello online, and hello to the world. Allow me this week to begin to discuss Thanksgiving. The end of this week will be Thanksgiving, and I'd like to share with you the Jewish perspective on this and the broader issue of gratitude and taking care and appreciation. So we, the American citizenry, are a thankful lot. Our calendar is dotted with days when we express our gratitude to various individuals and entities. For example, on Veterans Day, we thank the members of the armed forces for their dedicated service. On Memorial Day, we show our gratitude to those courageous men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice while defending our liberties and democratic lifestyle. On Labor Day, we express our appreciation to the industrious American workforce, the people who keep the wheels of our economy turning. On other selected days, we pause to thank different historic individuals who made valuable contributions to our nation. Well, as a rabbi, I always think, let's look into the Torah for a deeper perspective. What light, what insight does Torah shed to this wonderful trait of thankfulness? Of course, there is Thanksgiving, the day when we thank God for enabling all of the above, all these other days in the United States of America, and for all else that Hashem, God, does for all of us. There's no doubt that this great country's historical, unprecedented success and prosperity is due to the fact that its founding fathers recognized that there is a supreme being who provides and cares for every creature. They understood that since God sustains and gives life to every being, it follows that every being has certain unalienable rights upon which no government can impinge. These strong morals upon which our republic was founded expresses themselves to this day in American life. Take a look at the dollar bill. What's written on there? In God we trust, which is a reassurance that as a people, we still recognize and acknowledge the source of all of our achievements. As Jewish citizens of this great land, we always look to the Torah for a deeper perspective and additional insight. So what light does the Torah shed to the wonderful trait of thankfulness? Actually, there's one particular mitzvah which is completely devoted to expressing gratitude. It's called the mitzvah of Bikurim. Let me explain. During the temple era, every farmer was commanded to bring to the holy temple in Jerusalem the first fruits which ripened in his orchard. There he would recite a passage thanking God for the land and its bountiful harvest, and the fruits were given to the priests, to the Kohanim. And the Medrash extols the great virtue of this mitzvah, going so far as to say that the land of Israel was given as a reward for this mitzvah of Bikurim, that they would observe upon entering the land. That the entire land was given because it would ultimately give expression through giving thanks with the first fruit. While the importance of expressing deserved gratitude is self-understood, it is difficult to comprehend what is the special significance of Bikurim, of presenting the first fruit. Think about this. Isn't our day jam-packed with thank yous? Think about this. The first words we utter when we wake up in the morning express our thanks to God for returning our souls to our bodies. 3 times during the course of the day, we thank God for everything imaginable. Before and after eating, we thank God for the food. There is even a blessing recited upon exiting from the restroom, thanking God for normal bodily functions. So with all the thanking which occurs on a daily basis, why the need for a specific mitzvah to emphasize this point? As I just mentioned, the mitzvah of bringing one's first fruit to Jerusalem, called Bikurim. And why the great reward for this particular form of expressing thanks? And the Rebbe points out, the Lubavitcher Rebbe points out, one obvious difference between Bikurim and all the other ways that we thank God. Bikurim, in bringing the first fruit, involves more than just words. It requires a commitment. The gratitude must express itself in deeds. Bikurim implies that our thankfulness to God cannot remain in the realm of emotions, thoughts, or even speech, but also must move us to action. So while the mitzvah of Bikurim, in its plainest sense, is not practiced today, its lesson is timeless and reminds us our gratitude to God must express itself in the actions of our daily life. Giving back the first of our fruit, the choicest share of the crop, is the only appropriate way to thank God for giving us all our fruit. Let me share this and develop this idea even further. I'm going to now kind of pivot to understanding the remarkable interplay between giving and receiving. Thanksgiving may not be an official holiday on the Jewish calendar, but its purpose is as Jewish an idea as you can ever imagine. Thanking God for our blessings is the first thing we do as soon as we open up our eyes. Our very descriptive, I'm sure you know the word Jew, the actual word Jew, comes from the Hebrew word Judah, a name given to him by his mother as an expression of gratitude for being given what she thought was even more than she deserved. A student once asked an interesting question about the name Thanksgiving. Aren't there 2 different concepts implicit in the word thanksgiving? Thanks has to do with the response to receiving. I receive something, I thank you. But giving, on the other hand, is the opposite of taking. It is philanthropic, it is generous, it is open-handed. I'm sure you've heard of the famous line, we make a living by what we get. We make a life by what we give. Perhaps in the word thanksgiving, there's a very profound idea concealed in the name of the day. We thank and we give so that we can demonstrate our understanding of the beautiful insight that I just mentioned, which comes from Winston Churchill. Again, we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. Philosophers have argued whether it's better to give or to receive. Today, we have the benefit of remarkable scientific studies which prove that altruism is not simply a moral value. Research has shown that giving makes us far happier than receiving. Thus, in a way, we're actually being both selfish and selfless by giving to others. Numerous studies have shown that giving money to others or to charity will put a much bigger smile on your face than spending it on yourself. Michael Norton, a professor at Harvard Business School, conducted one such study. Along with his colleagues, Norton questioned 632 Americans about their level of income and what they spent their money on. They were also asked to rate their own happiness. They found that, regardless of income, those who spent money on others were decidedly happier than those who spent more on themselves. Psychologists from University of Chicago, the Booth School of Business, and Northwestern University Kellogg School of Management carried out a series of experiments to see which brought the longest lasting joy, giving a gift to yourself or to others. In one of the experiments, 96 participants received $5 every day for 5 days and were randomly assigned to spend the money on themselves or on someone else. This could be by leaving money in a tip jar at a cafe or making an online donation to a charity every day. But they had to spend the money on the exact same thing each time. The findings, published in the Journal of Psychology Science, showed that when they repeatedly gave to others, the participants' happiness did not decline, and the joy they felt from giving to others on the 5th day was just as strong as on the 1st day. There's a Paul J. Zak, a professor at the Claremont Graduate University, reported in Psychology Today that he has been investigating the biological basis for generosity, focusing on the neuroactive hormone oxytocin. He began his study because he wondered if science could explain the extraordinary generosity of billions of dollars of wealth and time donated. Zak's conclusion is contrary to the historical evolutionary thinking and actually reflects a Jewish value. And he explains that this giving connects us to others, and social connections are a powerful way to increase our own happiness. If you want to connect to others, being generous is a great start. By giving, we at the same time receive. So not surprisingly, serving family and friends has similar health benefits despite the stress of becoming a family caregiver. People who provided practical help to friends, relatives, or neighbors, or who gave emotional support to their spouses have a reduced mortality risk of over a 5-year period. The benefit was not limited to one condition, but was spread across a lengthy list of health risks from stress. Now, caregivers and caretakers. I'm going to talk about that for a moment now because of its great significance, and then hopefully share with you also an important document that I've just, thank God, published that relates to the art of being a caregiver, of giving. Going back to our original thought here, it's thanksgiving, not just thanks of what we've received, but it's 2 words put together. We are thankful for being in the position of being a giver as opposed to just simply a receiver. I think it is highly revealing that there are 2 words in English which seem to be opposite, yet in fact refer to one and the same person. Someone who extends needed help to the disabled and to those who otherwise cannot take care of themselves is called a caregiver. However, another name for this very same individual is called a caretaker. Giver and taker are not contradictory. By giving, we are at the same time receiving. The gift of being a blessing is transformed into personal gratification beyond measure. Caregivers are turned into caretakers in the form of a divine blessing. Therefore, the name Thanksgiving manages to convey the duality of our responses to the gifts we are acknowledging from the Almighty. Yes, we need to give thanks for the love and the compassion God has shown us in our lives. And our thanks must be accompanied by giving. Doing both will entitle us to be blessed both as a caretaker and as a caregiver. both at the same time. Allow me to digress for a moment and share with you the what I call caring, a guide to caregiving. If anybody would like a complimentary copy of this guide to caregiving, call us at 516-739-3636. Leave us your name and address, or send us an email with your name and address to Rabbi Perl, RABBIPERL, at Chabad Mineola, it's one word, CHABADMINEOLA.com. So again, send us an email to Rabbi Perl at ChabadMineola.com, or give us a call, and we're more than happy, at no cost, to send you this complimentary guide to caregiving. Again, keeping in mind Thanksgiving this week, and how the word Thanksgiving emphasizes the thanks of being in the position of being a giver, as opposed to just simply a receiver. And also the fact a caregiving person becomes a caretaker, to take as well as to give. So first of all, the gift of being a caregiver. I must say that there are three groups affected by illness: the patient, the caregiver, and the family. In many ways, the caregiver is really a hidden patient. The role of a caregiver is certainly not one we request. Undoubtedly, it is a very daunting and challenging responsibility. Therefore, it's normal for any caregiver to initially feel very overwhelmed. At the same time, it is a sublime opportunity that involves the lofty mitzvah of the good deed of emulating God's ways of caring and compassion. Now, let's analyze for a moment the responsibilities of the caregiver. If you are a caregiver for a parent, then at every moment you're also fulfilling the fifth commandment of what is that? Of honoring our father and mother. This commandment includes feeding one's parent, giving them to drink, helping them in their getting dressed. These are all duties of a caregiver. If you're a husband caring for a wife, guess what? You're actually living up to the commitment that was made at marriage. For in the ketubah, the Jewish marriage document, what does the husband pledge to his dear wife? That he will cherish, feed, and support her. So when caring for a spouse, we must be very careful to reassure them that they are not a burden and are very much loved. Let's continue. You know, one of the things that all of us face is the welfare of the caregiver themselves. It's understatement to say that caregivers have a lot on their plates. Your welfare as a caregiver is very important. Therefore, you should not hesitate to accept outside help and delegate responsibilities whenever possible. Do what it takes to maintain proper eating and sleeping habits in order to have strength to care for your loved ones. Be careful not to neglect your spouse or your children when caregiving, and consult with a knowledgeable spiritual advisor whenever necessary to find a correct balance. Now, let's continue this. And by the way, again, I remind everyone that I can send you a copy of this guide to the caregiver, by simply calling us at 516-739-3636 or dropping us an email with your address at rabbiperl@chabadmineola.com. Let me continue. Let's speak a moment about the art of a caring caregiver. The mental health of the patient is of paramount importance. Therefore, it is important to consider whether or not the patient needs to know the specific of his diagnosis. Important to choose a doctor with a positive outlook and a good bedside manner. Help the patient experience pleasure despite their compromised condition, to implement, of course, an effective pain management as well. Therefore, a successful caregiver also includes ensuring the patient receives proper nutrition. If the patient feels controlled by the caregiving spouse, as an example, it might necessary be to bring in others to help in that situation. Here is a very serious, you could say, challenge to all caregivers, and that is the end-of-life issues that a caregiver has to face. It's very important to choose a doctor who shares your values regarding end-of-life issues. Decisions of healthcare professionals are frequently in contrast to Jewish values. DNR, do not resuscitate. DNI, do not intubate. DNT, do not treat. Depends, of course, on the situation, which is why it is crucial to work with and trust both the doctor and a designated religious advisor knowledgeable in Jewish medical laws and ethics. There is a Jewish healthcare living will, which is important. I encourage people to sign. Why? Why is that? Again, I'm talking about a Jewish healthcare living will, not just a simple living will, a health proxy. It has the advantage of including the name of a religious advisor, a rabbi sometimes, or a person to be consulted to help the proxy make the correct Jewish medical and ethical decisions under those circumstances. Talking about Thanksgiving, there's the gratitude of the caregiver as well to be considered. When we remember that everything is from God and for good, and that everything is in His hands, we take on our challenges without regret or self-pity. This awareness also allows us to relate to those to whom we give care. It's with true love and respect, knowing that they are not an external burden or the patient's a coincidence that happened to fall into life, but rather an important intrinsic part of our life. And that is the life that God is supervising with love and kindness. Yes, we, the caregiver, the patient, and God are partners in this together. Also, I want to emphasize the caregiver's own gift of health. We must always remember that our own divine gift of health does not make us superior to those who have challenges of illness. Let us remember to use our gifts to develop gratitude for all that we have and don't have, and to help all those who we can. Let us open our eyes and our hearts and to be grateful for the ability and the opportunity given to us to care and to help. I now continue with something which, after these many years, thank God, I have the opportunity to serve as the resident rabbi at NYU Langone Hospital in Mineola, formerly known as Winthrop. A term that I often come across that I'd like to share with you, because it's become a common practice to call people without obvious consciousness they're in terrible, health issues, and the term vegetable comes up. They're now a vegetable. They have no quality of life. Now, what does this mean? I often inside of me, half-heartedly laugh. Oh, this person's a vegetable. Oh, did the person's hands, legs, heart, and brain that they used for years have now converted to some tiny leaves, roots, seeds, or some chlorophyll now? What happened? Has everything turned into a vegetable? And does that mean that the soul of this ill person has become a life force of a vegetable, no different than that of a potato? Let us remember the soul, the neshama that is part of God, is part of the infinite. The soul is the essence of life. Are we to believe suddenly that the soul that has suddenly lost its holiness because of an accident or an illness? So I respectfully ask that we erase that term on a patient and by calling them a vegetable. As I often, counsel families at advanced stages under trying circumstances in a hospital, do not think of the person by the machines and what's pumping in and pumping out. Think of them as their soul, the legacy, how they lived and what they did. That's who they are. Don't define them by either the illness or the machines that are pumping all around. Furthermore, my friends, we are the invisible caregivers. Think about this. Have you ever fantasized about being invisible? Imagine you go about your day without being seen or noticed. Imagine being in the position of being able to make yourself invisible. And then try to become in this invisible position, try to think of yourself as a caregiver. You see, caregivers don't make headlines. They perform their duties unnoticed, silently, imperceptible, and voiceless to most of society. Because in truth, whether it's a healthcare giver, a nurse, a doctor, whatever, or a caregiver in the sense of a family situation, they are really the quiet, unassuming heroes. Now, if you're listening, joining us, and you are not a caregiver, but know of someone who could use a few minutes of your time, please help them. Appreciate what they're doing. And also, please be patient and compassionate, because caregivers desperately need understanding and gentle, loving care and kindness, and they don't need lectures or criticism. You didn't do this and you didn't do that, and where were you there? Why weren't you late? Garbage, my friends. That's not the way we should treat a caregiver. And finally, my friends, on this special guide that's available, complimentary, I share a beautiful insight, advice from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Someone wrote to him and spoke about feeling helpless in their situation. And the Rebbe suggests, and I share this advice, that if a person feels that they have so much overwhelming them, and the world has a power over them in a certain sense, the Rebbe suggests the following: study chapter 23 of the book of Psalms. Become well versed in it. Recite this chapter, the Rebbe says, on Shabbos, Monday, and Thursday. And the Rebbe was speaking to a lady, encouraging her to give several coins to charity before lighting the Shabbos candles. And the Rebbe says, reflecting what's written in the book of Psalms in chapter 23, what does it say over there? God is with you, and only goodness and kindness will follow you all the days of your life. So if a person wants to calm their nerves, study, repeat this very calming chapter of Psalms. So you can see, dear friends, there's a lot to talk about in terms of being a caregiver. And of course, our conversation today about being a caregiver, at the same time being a caretaker, and the importance of appreciating the word thanksgiving, that we're giving thanks for also being in the position of a giver as opposed to simply a taker. And that is what the name Thanksgiving conveys to us in our appreciation and acknowledgement of the Almighty God. Now, you may be surprised to hear that the word Jew, continue our subject matter today of Thanksgiving, that the word Jew does not appear in the 5 books of Moses. Remember earlier on I just mentioned that the root of the word Jew, J-E-W, comes from the word Yehud or Yehuda, which means thanksgiving. The Torah refers, when it speaks about the Jewish people, talks about the children of Israel, Bnei Yisrael, because we of the children of our patriarch Jacob, who is also given the additional name Yisrael. And this Yisrael, or Israel, fathered 12 children who became the 12 tribes of Israel. So the name Jew comes from the name Judah, J-U-D-A-H, which means thanksgiving. Judah was the 4th son of Jacob and his wife Leah. As we're reading, and the Torah tells us, and she conceived again and bore a son. And she said, this time I will thank Hashem. And therefore she named that child Yehuda, Judah. So the question is, why is everybody called by the name of just one tribe? We've emphasized there were 12 tribes. And yet the name Judah is applied to all Jewish people. So what is it about thanksgiving, Judah, Yehuda, that captures the essence? Because thanksgiving is easier said than done. We often look around and wonder why some of the people around us are so ungrateful. Why don't our children appreciate all that we do for them? Why does our spouse not show gratitude? Why do our co-workers take us for granted? To understand why the feeling of gratitude is so elusive, we must examine the Hebrew word for gratitude, hoda'ah, the root of the name Judah. Hoda'ah also means to acknowledge, as in acknowledging that another's opinion is correct. So why do these 2 seemingly distinct ideas, thanksgiving and acknowledgement, share the same word? What possible connection do they share? The answer is that the key to being thankful is acknowledging the other's perspective. What a breath of fresh air in the politically uncivil world that we live in today. To illustrate, a mother does so much for her child, yet does the child really appreciate it? The child may take the mother for granted, thinking that she is just doing what she is supposed to do as a mother. After all, argues the child, isn't this her job? The only way the child can genuinely feel grateful is if he adopts her perspective, if he appreciates all her sacrifices and all the time she lovingly dedicates to him or to her. The same is true of a spouse. We can say thank you for an act of kindness, but to truly feel grateful, we need to see the picture from the perspective of our spouse. We need to appreciate all the thought, feeling, and energy that was invested in this one act. Only when we acknowledge and appreciate the other's point of view, hoda'ah, can we say todah, thank you. Therefore, to be who we are is to possess the ability to see beyond the obvious, to acknowledge the other's perspective. Therefore, to be who we are is to experience the pain of others, as well as rejoice in their happiness as if it were our own. To be who we should be is to acknowledge and accept the perspective of hope and joy, even in the midst of great hardship. There's an ongoing and long-standing dispute between the creation and the Creator. Our perspective is that our life, health, and success is due to our independent efforts, and that the only one we need to thank is ourselves. But from God's perspective, however, the entire universe is being brought into existence every moment by the Word of God. So from his perspective, from God's perspective, the only true reality is the godly vitality within every created being. So we have the responsibility to see the world from God's perspective, to cultivate the point of view that focuses on the spiritual rather than the physical. We possess that gift of acknowledgement and can therefore experience genuine thanksgiving. Now, talking about thanksgiving, people sit down to Thanksgiving. It's a wonderful, wonderful environment. The family come together. The Rebbe extolled this wonderful trait that we have in the United States, where family come together and they have nice food. But I want to share with you some advice, particularly in our times, that avoid toxic holiday arguments about politics and other divisive issues with fun questions that will spark interesting discussion with friends and family and make the Thanksgiving gathering, or however you celebrate it, in a meaningful way. Let me give you some ideas. You don't have to agree with everything I say, but I'm suggesting them. How to make your Thanksgiving gathering more deeper and more meaningful and worthwhile. For example, ask children, whatever age you may be, what do you think makes a person a good friend? If you were principal for a day and could change something about your school, what would it be? What are you best at? What do you wish you were best at? Another question, if you could time travel, what time would you visit? Would it be, what would you bring along with you in this time travel? Another question, what makes your family special? What makes you special? If a movie was made about your life, what would happen in the movie? How would the movie end? What is your favorite part of the day? What's your favorite part of the week? If you could tell everybody in the world something, what would you tell them? What job looks like it's the hardest or the most fun? What would be your favorite job? What would you like that most people don't? Right? What would you like that most people don't like? What do you not like that most people do? Let's turn to the relatives and the friends at your Thanksgiving gathering and ask them the following questions. My main point, my friends, is avoid politics and the issues of the day. Bring some depth. What was your best day? Your worst? What book has most influenced you through the years? What movie? What are you most proud of in your life? Can you name one goal of yours for the next few years? Do you have any plans to work towards it? Why or why not? What was the best piece of advice you ever received and why? What was the scariest moment? Do you wish you'd handled it differently? What skill did you learn in school that's been most useful? I will personally share with you what I learned most in my earlier years in school, that my teachers in the different grades and different schools appreciated the effort made by the students. He didn't expect everyone to be most brilliant and know all the questions, know all the answers, but giving me the opportunity to be the best I could be as something that stayed with me and I appreciate. Another question, what are you most grateful for? And do you express that gratitude? And how do you do that? What would be your perfect day? Have you ever had a day like that? What is the funniest thing that you've ever happened to you? I would say listen to this program. What about asking our parents? Right? Your parents are at the Thanksgiving table and you want to make it meaningful. Why not ask them, how did you meet, Mom and Dad? Where did you go on for your first date? When did you first realize that you wanted to spend the rest of your lives together? Another question you may ask, what was your best friend? Who was your best friend when you were a child? What did you play together? And when you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up? Who did you name me and my siblings after and why? Remind them to tell you of why you were given a particular name. Your Jewish name, I would think, is also important, more important maybe, of why you were given that name. And tell us more stories about them. Like, why did you choose to call your son or your daughter a particular name? When you were a child, what would you have guessed 2022, this year, would look like? What did you or your siblings do during the summer break when you were a child? What was your first apartment like? If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be and why? I also think it's important to say, did you receive any awards when you were a child in different grade schools or whatever? If you could make one change in your life, what would it be? That takes honesty, my friends. Okay, so we have some questions, ideas for the children, for our parents. What about grandparents? Right? If you're lucky, you have your grandparents with you during the Thanksgiving weekend. Why don't you ask them a few important questions? Where did you and Grandma and Grandpa meet? Where was your first date? Was it love at first sight? What was your favorite subject in school? Who was your favorite teacher? What was your bedroom like when you were a child? What details do you remember? Another question could be, who are you named after? Do you remember any stories about them? And when you do that, you come to find out a lot about your ancestry and your background. What was your favorite holiday as a child? What did your family eat on that holiday? Who do the younger generations most resemble on our family tree? Amazing. Do you know where your parents and grandparents grew up? What was your favorite book when you were little? What was your favorite toy? Who did your family celebrate holidays with when you were a child? How did you travel to visit each other? Many times people tell me of when they lived in Brooklyn, and the parents and grandparents lived in the same, walk up, the same apartment building. So everybody saw their grandparents, lived with them. The grandparents were always available to be at home when the parents were away. A whole different world than we have today. Try to find out more about how that was in the generation, back. If you could choose, you could also grandparents like this, if you could choose one skill to master in the next year, what would it be and why? Well, there is so many ideas that we have about Thanksgiving, that, there's all kinds of different types of people that we meet at the holiday buffets and the Thanksgiving parties, different levels, in a I would say the humorous way, those who overstay, there's so many things. I could go on to in great length on the different aspects of the kinds of personalities that show up, but all in jest and in humor. The main thing is to use the opportunity. In fact, many of the things that I'm suggesting is something that we often try to inculcate and do on Friday nights when people are home around the Shabbos table, and not to talk about politics and other meaningless stuff. We do plenty of that during the week, but to use the opportunity to share a divine providence, something that you saw the hand of God so clearly revealing during the course of the week. So gratitude is such an important aspect and such an important dimension of our lives in terms of gratitude and how we bring that attitude and how we express it. You know, in biblical times, there was a special offering brought, an actual offering. It was called the Korban Todah, a thanksgiving offering. And it's basically a shlamim, which means a peace offering. But unlike any other peace offering, it's brought with all kinds of, let's talk about in biblical times, in temple times in Jerusalem, together with this peace offering, there were 4 different types of flour offerings, 10 of each type. 3 types of matzah, a 4th was made of chametz, all kinds of things. And in addition, the normal time span with which the peace offering had to be eaten, which is usually 2 days and 1 night, when it comes to Korban Todah, the Thanksgiving offering, is reduced. It has to be eaten 1 day and 1 night. Why? Why would that be? Why would there be such a deviation from normal laws when it comes to Thanksgiving? Why was there a shorter period of time where the offering itself had to be not only presented but also eaten in a shorter time? So again, the Talmud relates that from the day God created the world, no one thanked God until Leah, as we mentioned earlier on, thanked Hashem for the birth of her 4th child, Yehuda. The Talmud is telling us this. At first glance, this defies understanding. Didn't Adam, Noah, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel have countless reasons and opportunities to thank God? So why didn't Leah herself thank God for her first 3 children? We make a big deal of why we're called Yehudim, because after the word Judah, and Judah was the 4th child. 1 second. She wasn't thankful for her first child, the 2nd, the 3rd, all the other great leaders. Why do we expressly say that real thanks was given by her? Hello, what about everybody else? And the Midrash sheds light to this. And it says in the name of Rabbi Levi, this can be compared to a Kohen who was given a large amount of truma by one individual but didn't thank him. He was then given a smaller measure of unconsecrated grain when there was a lesser, and he thanked the donor. Said the first individual to the Kohen, I gave you such a large amount. Why didn't you thank me? He gave you a very small amount and you thanked him. Like, why did you treat these 2 people differently? And the Kohen replied, you gave me what rightfully belonged to me. Well, that's the law. That's how the Kohanim were subsidized and how they were supported. So I saw no reason to thank you. But the other person, he gave me what belonged to him, upon which I have no claim. Therefore I thanked him. Fascinating idea. So too, our matriarchs knew that Jacob would have 12 sons, and each of the 4 matriarchs expected 3 sons. Therefore, when Leah had her 4th child, she thanked God, for she had received more than her portion. Thanksgiving is a recognition of receiving something undeserved and feeling indebted to repay the giver with gratitude. The more one feels that the bounty received was indeed earned or deserved, the less necessary to show the show of gratitude. For example, a laborer does not owe his boss a thank you for paying him his previously agreed wages, but for an unexpected bonus, wow, a thank you is appropriate. From the time the world was created, no one ever felt that the bounty given to them by God was totally undeserved. Even the greatest people thought that what was given to them was part of God's plan for the world, and therefore not completely undeserved. But God's plan could have been equally fulfilled if the 4th son born to Leah had been born to any other of her sisters. Therefore, Leah felt his birth was totally unearned and required this full measure of gratitude, which is really, really a very, very powerful insight to what Thanksgiving is all about. The Medrash links Leah's thanks to the admission that she was responsible through her many wonderful blessings happened that underscore the foundation of Thanksgiving. Usually we offer thanksgiving to God for a salvation from a misfortune or a calamity. But if we are truly believing that everything occurs in this world is the result of divine providence, then it is hard to understand why we should thank God for saving us from misfortune, since He Himself caused that misfortune. Would we thank somebody for paying our medical bills if we fell into a concealed trap that He had left open in the public thoroughfare? The answer is that we have chosen the wrong analogy. Consider an orthopedic surgeon who sometimes notices someone walking in a manner that is symptomatic of a rare crippling bone disease. The condition can only be cured if the bones are broken and reset before the disease progresses to the point of no return. Realizing that the patient's gait reveals little time left before his condition is irreversible, the surgeon now takes an iron pole and swiftly breaks both of his legs and then proceeds to set them and nurture the patient back to health. In this instance, the surgeon deserves thanks for both breaking and setting the legs. So too, when we cause ourselves spiritual shortcomings, it becomes a very, we in a sense we've got to correct that. There's certain spiritual challenges. Therefore, our gratitude for salvation also includes an appreciation of what, if a person's facing a challenge, there's also a spiritual side to that, and therefore there has to be a recognition and also a thanksgiving for having overcome this. So, acknowledgement, appreciating what we have in life, giving as opposed to just taking, is really so important to what life is all about. I'd like to pivot a little bit from this Thanksgiving aspect to talk about when is the last time you asked someone how they are doing and they didn't answer busy. They're busy. There's an article that I read recently that says that if you live in America in the 21st century, you've probably had to listen to a lot of people tell you how busy they are. It's become the default response when you ask someone how they're doing. Busy, so busy, crazy busy. It is pretty obviously a boast disguised as a complaint. And the stock response is a kind of a congratulations. Oh, that's a problem, a good problem to have. Better the opposite, better than the opposite. Now look around, you'll notice it is generally people. It isn't really people pulling back, who are pulling back-to-back shifts at the ICU or commuting by bus to 3 minimum wage jobs who tell you how busy they are. What these people are is not busy, but tired, exhausted, dead on their feet. It's almost always people whose lamented busyness is purely self-imposed. Work and obligations they've taken on voluntarily, classes and activities they've encouraged their children to participate in. They're busy because of their own ambition or drive or anxiety, because they're addicted to busyness and dread what they might have to face in its absence. One study from the Monthly Labor Review found that people estimating 75-plus hour work weeks were off, on average, about 25 hours. It mentioned that a young man reported working 180 hours a week, which is quite literally impossible, since that there is 12 more hours than the week contains. How many hours a week do you work? when the angels in the guise of men appeared before Abraham, he offers them water to wash their feet. The Chizkuni explains, this all occurred during the season of the desert winds, known as Sharaf. Hashem had made the day especially hot, so the feet of the travelers would be soaked in sand and sweat. But Rashi explains that he believed that they were idolaters who bowed down to the dust of their feet, and therefore Abraham didn't want them bringing that idolatry into their home. And the commentators explain, what kind of idolatry is this? Of course, it is wrong to worship anything other than God, but who would be so foolish as to worship the dust of their own feet? And the commentators explain, these idolaters were merchants. They traveled and ran around doing business, selling their wares, growing customers. All of that activity and busyness kicked up dust. The idea that they were worshipping the dust of their feet, says the commentaries, is that they were bound down to their busyness. They were kneeling to their efforts and initiative. These merchants were obsessed and addicted to running around, staying busy, kicking up dust. They mistakenly attributed their success to the level of their activity. They assumed that their determination and work, their busyness, yielded results and was not Hashem, not coming from God. That, in a sense, is idolatry. And many people tie their self-worth to how busy they are, or at least appear to be. When people ask us how things are doing, many of us are in the business of busyness and instinctively talk about how little time we have, how much we have going on, and how busy things are. Leisure time used to be viewed as a status symbol. Now free time has become looked down as idleness. Instead, hectic busyness has become the symbol of achievement. So therefore Abraham says, Rachzu b'raglechem, wash your feet, get rid of that dust, eliminate the addiction and worshipness and the worshiping of busyness, and enjoy life. Slow down, appreciate everything that we have. That, my friends, is such an important time when Thanksgiving comes around to sit back, enjoy the family, discuss deep ideas, appreciate the meaning, and obviously they should be both thanksgiving and caretaking and caregiving, and it's really a time for us to appreciate all the blessings that we have. This is your host, Rabbi Perl, wishing you a wonderful week and a week filled with thanksgiving and appreciation. Shalom.